Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, March 11th, 2025. All right, first thing, we started our fundraiser for antiwar.com this week, and this is how we get by. This is how antiwar.com is able to operate. We are entirely funded by our readers. So if you appreciate my work and what we do and you have the means, please consider making a donation. We're trying to raise $100,000 this time around. You go to antiwar.com/donate to help us out. We accept crypto and things like that, and there's a phone number there where you can call. Usually you speak with Angela Keaton when you call by phone, who does a lot of fundraising for us, which is some of the really the most important work you can do for antiwar.com. So again, please help us out. You know, we like to do these fundraisers quickly so we could focus on everything, but it's necessary to run the site, and your money is spent very efficiently. It goes toward running the website, paying the small staff and contributors that we have. So again, antiwar.com/donate. All right, so the first story, we're going to get into a lot of serious stuff here. The first story at the top of antiwar.com, Syria's HTS ops against Alawites are declared over. So this one is from Jason Ditz. Starting on Thursday, the Syrian Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's brutal anti-Alawite crackdown raged throughout the weekend with 1,300 people reported killed, more than 1,000 of them civilians. The HTS government has declared that the operation's over. Public reckoning of what happened is likely far from over, though the defense ministry announced on Monday that they had accomplished their missions and had neutralized the Alawite militias, though they referred to them as the Syrian Arab Army, because that's the narrative here, is that they're fighting Assad remnants here. And they also, this is again the Syrian Defense Ministry, they also declared victory across Tartus and Latakia, which is where these massacres took place. And the fighting against militias is only a fraction of the story, as Defense Ministry and Interior Ministry forces carried out mass executions of Alawite civilians in these areas. There are also reports that they killed some members of the Christian minority. I know they certainly did kill Christians. We don't know exactly the scale of it. A Greek MEP was in Damascus over the weekend and claimed to have seen reliable data that over 7,000 Christians and Alawites were killed, though that is far higher than any other number being reported. And essentially, the HTS is attempting to offer assurances about what happened. HTS leader Ahmad al-Shara, formerly known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria, who's now the de facto president of Syria, he blamed the Alawites for the fighting, but also warned that killing Alawite civilians posed a threat to unity. He announced the creation of an independent committee to announce what happened, to investigate what exactly happened, though it just doesn't seem like there's really going to be any kind of accountability for these massacres. And Syria's defense minister, he did issue an order admonishing his troops, but the order was telling them not to film what they were doing. It wasn't telling them to stop. It was saying, do not film your activities. And that's really what, drew attention to this, was the fact, the mainstream media was barely, they were reporting this as just kind of clashes between HTS and the militias. But all over social media, these videos began to surface, and these were videos recorded by these HTS guys and put on Telegram of them executing people and humiliating people and making them crawl around and bark like dogs. Just really gruesome stuff. So that was the order from the defense ministry, was, hey, don't film it. Similar to what the Israeli military tells the IDF soldiers who were posting all their war crimes in Gaza on social media. All right, so the next one here, the U.S.-backed Kurds reached deal to merge with the HTS government. So on Monday, the U.S.-backed Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, signed a deal to merge into the new Syrian government, which is led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, an offshoot of Al-Qaeda. The deal was signed between SDF chief Mazloum Abdi and Shara, the de facto leader of Syria. The SDF controls a significant portion of Syria's northeast, where there are about 2,000 U.S. troops deployed. According to a statement from Shara's office, the deal will integrate, quote, all civil and military institutions in northeast Syria under the administration of the Syrian state, including border crossings, the airport, and oil and gas fields, end quote. So the agreement comes after Shara's HTS forces conducted all these massacres. So I mentioned some of the same things that Jason had in his story. And while his forces just went on a killing spree against minorities in the Northwest, Shara still insists that his government will be inclusive. The deal that he signed with Abdi said that all Syrians will be part of the political process, regardless of religion or ethnicity, and pledges that the Kurds will have their constitutional rights. The SDF has been battling with Turkey and its proxy, the Syrian National Army, in northern Syria, and those clashes continued on Monday as Abdi was signing the deal with Shara. Turkey considers the SDF the Syrian wing of the PKK, which has fought Ankara for decades. And the PKK's jailed leader recently called for the group to disarm, and this was followed by the PKK announcing a ceasefire with Turkey, but Turkey has continued military operations in both Iraq and Syria against the Kurds. So, HTS signing a deal with the Kurds, at first thought I was like, hey, maybe the Turks aren't going to be happy about this. Erdogan's not going to be happy about this. But on second thought, Turkey basically greenlit the HTS offensive. They've backed HTS for years, and I think they were very involved in coordinating the offensive. The U.S. was involved as well. They helped coordinate between HTS and one of their proxies, a U.S. proxy militia in southern Syria. So maybe, would HTS do something that Turkey didn't want them to do like this? I kind of doubt it. And I know there's a possibility here. So if the Kurds merge into the Syrian military, then maybe Arab troops or whatever, HTS troops could be deployed to the border regions with Turkey. That was always a potential solution, a deal that was considered when Assad was still in power, the idea that the Kurds would merge with the Syrian Arab army and then the Arab troops would be deployed to the Turkish border areas. But, just surprising to see this after the atrocities that we just saw committed by HTS. All right, so the next one here, Israel condemns Syria government as Al-Qaeda terrorists. So this one's from Jason again. After a weekend of fighting between the HTS government and Alawite militias and the massacres of Alawite civilians, Israel is expressing newfound outrage against the HTS. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar is taking credit for predicting acts of revenge by the HTS, condemning them as pure evil because of the barbaric murder of civilians, and demanded the global community unite to deny Syria's government any legitimacy and further denounce their killings. Israel Katz, the Israeli defense minister, also called HTS leader Ahmad Shara an Al-Qaeda terrorist. And again, Shara did found, he joined Al-Qaeda in Iraq, went over to Syria, founded the Nusra Front, which was Al-Qaeda in Syria, and then spun that off into a different group in 2017 or 2016, and then created HTS in 2017. So the Israeli defense minister is not exactly wrong here, and the criticism is certainly founded. But I think it's obvious what's happening here. This all happens with the backdrop of Israel after the regime change. Even though Netanyahu took credit for the regime change, Israel was bombing the Assad government very heavily in the weeks leading up to the HTS offensive. They're using the HTS takeover as a reason to take Syrian territory and occupy southern Syria. And they're making it very clear they have no intention of leaving anytime soon. So I think that is, pretty clear what's happening here. All right, so the next one here, U.S. Senator says that he has never been more worried about Syria. So this one's from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. After a decade-long American effort to remove Syrian President Bashar al-Assad from power in Damascus, Senator Lindsey Graham says that the U.S.-backed jihadists that now control the country are causing more concern than ever. It's just really rich to hear this from Lindsey Graham. Again, he's been a cheerleader of the regime change effort against Assad, of course, now saying, it just goes to show how absurd U.S. foreign policy is. So Graham said that he has never more been worried about the deterioration of Syria than he is now. He was discussing the outbreak and violence that happened over the weekend, of course, the massacres. Kyle gets into some background here about how under the Obama administration, Washington provided training and arms for Assad's opposition, hoping to remove him from power and undermine Iran's regional influence. However, the most powerful rebel factions were violent jihadists, Al-Qaeda, including Al-Qaeda, and this was a fact acknowledged in a 2012 internal memo circulated by Obama's Defense Intelligence Agency. That's back in 2012, saying that I forget exactly the wording, but as Kyle says, the most powerful rebel factions were these extremist groups. And there was also the infamous email of Jake Sullivan telling Hillary Clinton that was released by WikiLeaks that AQ is on our side in Syria. So it's just, again, really rich here to hear what Lindsey Graham had to say. And he said in this interview, quote, "Is this Al-Qaeda or ISIS light, or is this some new form of Islam that we can all live with?" End quote. So, and again, Kyle gets into some of his, calls over the years to support the regime change effort against Assad. All right, so the next one here, Trump vows more arrests for pro-Palestine acts. So President Trump on Monday vowed that the arrest of a green card holder over his involvement in protests critical of Israel was the first of many to come, as civil liberties groups are pushing back against the campaign that has chilling implications for the First Amendment. So I got into some of these details yesterday about this arrest, but it's a really important story. This is just a total flagrant violation of the First Amendment here. So over the weekend, Mahmoud Khalil, a recent Columbia grad student who served as a spokesman for student activists seeking the university's divestment from Israel, was detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE agents in his university-owned apartment. For now, a federal judge is preventing Khalil from being deported. Judge Jesse Furman of the Southern District of New York said in a court order on Monday, quote, "To preserve the court's jurisdiction pending a ruling on the petition, petitioner shall not be removed from the United States unless and until the court orders otherwise," end quote. And that was, again, a response to a petition filed by Khalil not to be deported, because that's what the Trump administration wants to do. And again, he has a green card, and you can't just deport somebody with a green card for no reason. We'll get into that a bit. So when he was arrested, Khalil was told that under orders from the State Department, his visa would be revoked for his participation in the protests. He informed the agents that he had a green card, making him a permanent resident, and he was told that would be revoked instead. They basically said, "Oh, you have a green card? Well, we're going to revoke that." So Khalil, who's an Algerian citizen of Palestinian descent, is married to an American citizen. So he's married to an American woman who is 8 months pregnant, and he's been ripped away from his wife right before she's going to have a baby. He's been taken to an ICE detention facility in Louisiana, which is 1,000 miles away from his wife and an unborn baby in New York City. And he's not been charged with any crime. So the Department of Homeland Security has only alleged that he led Hamas-aligned protests and in support of President Trump's executive order prohibiting anti-Semitism. They said that they arrested him. So notice how they describe Trump's executive order. They said it's an order prohibiting anti-Semitism. And so President Trump wrote on Truth Social, quote, "Following my previously signed executive orders, ICE proudly apprehended and detained Mahmoud Khalil, a radical foreign pro-Hamas student on the campus of Columbia University. This is the first arrest of many to come. We know there are more students at Columbia and other universities across the country who have engaged in pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, anti-American, and the Trump administration will not tolerate it," end quote. So on Sunday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio posted a story on X about Khalil being arrested and said, quote, "We will be revoking the visas and or green cards of Hamas supporters in America so they can be deported," end quote. And as I've said repeatedly, the term Hamas supporters has not been defined by the administration, and critics of U.S. support for Israel and Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories are always labeled pro-Hamas. I tweeted about this, how this is wrong, what's happening. I forget exactly how I worded it. I said basically anybody celebrating his arrest as an enemy of freedom in the U.S., this is being done on behalf of a foreign country, and Americans are next, because I do think that it's obvious that they're also trying to crack down on Americans who participated in these protests. And just so many people, calling me a terrorist in response. It's just completely absurd. And the videos that I've seen of him, well-spoken guy, again, he was representing the student group and their demands for Colombia to divest. And there are some videos of, from what I've seen, these protests overwhelmingly were peaceful. And of course, there's some videos of some vandalism, but there's just no evidence. And the Department of Homeland Security, they're not alleging that he committed any crime like that. They're not charging him with the crime. They're not alleging that he was violent. They're just saying he did activity that's aligned with Hamas. That's like saying, if I oppose U.S. aid for Ukraine, does that mean that I'm aligned with Putin? If I oppose the U.S. invading Iraq, does that mean that I'm aligned with Saddam? If I oppose U.S. military aid to Israel, does that mean that I'm aligned with Hamas? So the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression sent a letter to Trump administration officials demanding answers about Khalil's arrest. This letter said, quote, demonstrations occurring on Columbia's campus since October 7, 2023 have included both constitutionally protected free speech and unlawful conduct, but the government has not made clear the factual or legal basis for Mr. Khalil's arrest. The statements the government has released suggest that its decision may be based on his constitutionally protected speech. This lack of clarity is chilling protected expression, as other permanent residents cannot know whether their lawful speech could be deemed to align to a terrorist organization and jeopardize their immigration status, end quote. Janine Yunus, a civil liberties attorney, said in a post on X that Khalil's arrest was political persecution and pointed to the fact that green card holders cannot be deported without a conviction. She said, quote, green card holders cannot be deported for mere charges, only actual convictions of crimes of moral turpitude and aggravated felonies. And Khalil hasn't even been charged. These are all major red flags that this is an attempt to punish someone for expressing views disfavored by the current administration and scare others with similar views into silence, end quote. And then about this guy, Khalil's character, Joseph Howley, who's a professor at Columbia, defended him in comments to the New York Times, saying that it was unfair to depict him as a dangerous person. There's a whole smear campaign against him now. There's all these people calling him a terrorist on X. And of course, they're posting these videos of him to justify it. And it's just, again, videos of him explaining some demands of the students, just nothing at all suggesting that he's a supporter of Hamas or anything like that. So this is, again, the Columbia professor said, quote, this is someone who seeks mediated resolutions through speech and dialogue. This is not someone who engages in violence or gets people riled up to do dangerous things. So it's really disturbing to see that kind of misrepresentation of him, end quote. All right, so the next one here, Hamas says that it is showing flexibility in talks with mediators and the U.S. So a Hamas official said on Monday that the group had been showing flexibility in Gaza ceasefire deal talks with Qatari and Egyptian mediators, as well as in its direct talks with the U.S. Hamas spokesman Abdul Latif Al-Qanu said, quote, we have shown flexibility in dealing with the efforts of mediators and Trump's envoy, and we are awaiting the results of the upcoming negotiations to ensure Israel abides by the agreement and proceeds to the second phase. The negotiations conducted with Egyptian and Qatari mediators, as well as Trump's envoy, are centered at ending the war, withdrawal, and reconstruction. We have fully committed to the first phase of the agreement, and our priority now is to shelter and provide relief to our people while ensuring a permanent ceasefire, end quote. So the U.S. official who held direct talks with Hamas, Adam Boehler, President Trump's special envoy for hostages, he defended the decision in the face of all this Israeli criticism, and he's getting trashed by Israeli media. On Monday, though, Secretary of State Marco Rubio described the engagement with Hamas as a one-off that didn't make any progress. So Rubio made it sound like he wasn't too fond of the idea. He said, quote, as of now, it hasn't borne fruit. Doesn't mean he was wrong to try, but our primary vehicle for negotiations on this front will continue to be Mr. Witkoff and the work he's doing through Qatar, end quote. So both Rubio and Witkoff were on their way to Saudi Arabia on Monday. They're going to be talking with Ukrainian officials on Tuesday. So we'll see how that goes. But then Witkoff is expected to head to Qatar after that to be involved in some talks. And Israel has been tightening the blockade on Gaza. And they cut electricity on Sunday. No goods can enter Gaza. Collective punishment of the civilian population. A war crime that is supported by the U.S. And it's a total violation of the initial ceasefire deal. So, it's still just no real sign of progress here when it comes to reaching any kind of deal. All right, so the next one here, Iran slams the U.S. for ending Iraq electricity waiver. So Iran on Monday denounced the U.S. decision not to renew a sanctions waiver for Iraq that allowed it to purchase electricity from neighboring Iran, a move that's part of the Trump administration's so-called maximum pressure campaign against Tehran. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman said, quote, such statements are an admission of lawlessness, an admission of crimes against humanity, because the U.S. sanctions, the unilateral U.S. sanctions against the Iranian nation have no legal or no justification or legal basis, end quote. He said that ending the waiver was absolutely illegal. The waiver first started in 2018 after the previous Trump administration unilaterally withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal by reimposing sanctions on Iran. Iraqis are worried that the lack of electricity from Iran will cause more power outages in the country. It's also unclear if Iraq will be able to purchase gas from Iran. The import of electricity from Iran, combined with the power generated by Iranian gas, accounts for 30% of Iraq's electricity. So that's the combined import of the electricity and what they generate with Iranian gas, and it's still unclear if they're going to be able to continue purchasing Iranian gas. And Iran's foreign minister also reiterated that Iran will not negotiate with the U.S. in the face of the maximum pressure. So no sign that there's any chance of talks here. All right, so the next one here, Hezbollah chief addresses Israeli occupation of South Lebanon. This one is from The Cradle. So Hezbollah's Secretary General Naim Qassem said on March 9th that Israeli forces currently occupying South Lebanon will inevitably face resistance if they do not withdraw. He said, quote, I tell the Israelis, if you remain at these points, this resistance will not let you continue there. If the occupation continues, it must be confronted by the army, the people, and the resistance. We committed to the ceasefire agreement. While the enemy violates it, it assaults people far from the border in their cars and in their homes. The ceasefire agreement is the one announced and distributed, and there is no secret agreement or clauses under the table. End quote. So basically saying that if the occupation continues, suggesting that Hezbollah could start attacking Israeli troops in southern Lebanon. We haven't seen that happen yet, but Israel continues to bomb Lebanon and fire at civilians returning to South Lebanon. All right, so the next one here, Rubio says 83% of USAID programs have been canceled. So Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Monday that after a 6-week review, the Trump administration will be canceling 83% of programs at the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. He said, quote, the 5,200 contracts that are now canceled spent tens of billions of dollars in ways that did not serve, and in some cases even harmed, the core national interests of the United States, end quote. He said the remaining programs would be put under the control of the State Department, which is approximately 1,000 programs. And it's unclear what these programs will be, the ones that will remain. This whole overhaul of USAID has really put a spotlight on the agency's role in destabilizing activities across the world. We have seen them, all sorts of stuff. I linked to a good piece from the Gray Zone there about it. And, it includes advancing regime change efforts, funding opposition groups and media outlets in other countries. Those are things I would guess that Marco Rubio likes, but we'll see if we can figure out what programs will continue under the control of Marco Rubio's State Department. All right, so the next one here, Trump says that the U.S. cannot cut military spending now. President Trump said in an interview that aired Sunday that he would like to cut military spending but could not do it now. The president denied that he said he wanted to cut military spending despite his recent suggestions that the U.S., Russia, and China could work out a three-way deal to slash their military budgets in half. He said, quote, I never said cut, not in these days. I'd love to cut defense spending, but not now because you have China, you have Russia, you have a lot of problems out there, end quote. And I mean, I know I've covered Trump calling for this deal with China and Russia to cut military spending and Putin saying he's open to the idea of everybody cutting their military budget in half. But realistically, is that going to happen? I say there's virtually no chance, unfortunately. The president has backed a House GOP budget plan that would increase the military budget by $100 billion. He's also ordered the development of what he's calling the Iron Dome for America, which just a massive missile defense system that would come with a huge price tag, of course. In this interview that he did with Fox News, he did acknowledge that he's been talking about the cost and the risk of nuclear weapons. It does seem like this is something that's kind of always on his mind. He said, quote, what I have said is that we spend a lot of money on nuclear missiles, nuclear weapons. The level of destruction is beyond anything that you can even imagine. It's just bad that everybody has to spend all this money on something that if it's used, it's probably going to end the world, end quote. He suggested several times that the U.S., he could work out a deal with Russia and China to denuclearize. And I really hope that this diplomacy with Russia leads to arms control talks because the state of arms control is very bad right now, in large part thanks to the previous Trump administration, which pulled out of the INF Treaty and the Open Skies Treaty. Now the only one left between the U.S. and Russia is New START, and that's going to expire next year, and there's no replacement yet. So again, hopefully some arms control talks happen, because if they don't, then we're just going to keep going on this path. And, the Iron Dome for America, if they actually do that, that could just start a new arms race. All right, so the next one, the last story here, protests in Romania after Georgescu's candidacy is rejected. So this article is from Remix News. They have a lot of news about Central and Eastern Europe. I originally got this from Zero Hedge. It looked pretty good because all the Western media coverage of this, they try to smear Georgescu and his followers. They call him far right, which maybe, I don't really know anything about Romanian politics. It's just I feel like they throw that term around to smear people. But the election authority in Romania has banned Georgescu, who won the election in Romania that was canceled over allegations of Russian interference that were just completely unfounded based on some TikTok activity that had no ties to Russia. And these allegations were made and supported by U.S.-funded NGOs in Romania. So they've said that he cannot run again. They've rejected his candidacy. And of course, this sparked very big protests in Bucharest, across Romania, not just in Bucharest. And he is saying that he's going to appeal the decision. He's going to fight to try to get back to be able to run again in the next election. And it's just, you hear the EU talk about democracy and everything, and you see this. It's just this is really, I think, unprecedented when it comes to the history of the European Union, a country just outright canceling an election when a candidate won that they didn't like. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Joseph D. Terwilliger: Kosovo, Taiwan, Abkhazia, self-determination shouldn't be selective. One from Ron Paul: tariffs are theft. One from Anthony Lowenstein: why American Jews are turning away from Israel. One from Medea Benjamin and Nicholas J.S. Davies: is this the beginning or the end of a new Cold War? And our spotlight is from Ted Carpenter: yes, Zelensky is a dictator. That's over at the American Conservative. So please go check all that stuff out. Help us out with our fundraiser. You could also support us by sharing this show, telling people about antiwar.com. Follow us on social media, on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. All that stuff helps. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.